Next up, we have Mr. Kevin Millsip, who's going to have a discussion with our colleagues. So our main theme for the year has been member engagement, and later on we're going to have Jane that is up here, but we want to know what is happening with our teachers, what's going on with our colleagues, what is happening in their schools and within their own framework of being within this profession. So without further ado, Mr. Millsip hails from Vancouver. He owns a national training program for young people who are passionate about social justice. He has been working with our members, and today we're going to have three to which I will call up. But first, Kevin, will you please join us on stage? Then can I have our panelists? So Marcia, Tim, and Lauren. Sorry about that, my apologies. Can you please join us and we'll get your mic to the right.
Great. Check, check. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. Thank you, Yvette. Thank you for the introduction. I want to thank the ETT PD Day Organizing Committee and the executive of the ETT. And I want to give a huge shout out to Sonia Ellis again. Sonia, wave your hand. Yeah, right there. Thank you for your leadership and your vision of making this day happen. So, as Yvette said, my name's Kevin Millsip. I live in Vancouver, proud British Columbian. Yeah, I'll hold there. I'll hold there. I'm a guest in your beautiful city, and I will say there will probably be maximum disruption in my province because of a certain political decision earlier this week. And I'll leave it there. I have a strong connection to public education, as do my colleagues on this stage, and I'll briefly tell you what that is. I'm a graduate of public schools from Vancouver, British Columbia. I was in the private system and the public system. The private system did not work for me. The public system really did. That's where I found teachers, absolutely, that's where I found teachers who are willing to invest the time in me that I needed to fulfill my potential as a kid and as a student. I wouldn't have found that in the private system. I got it in the public system. I served as a school board trustee on the Vancouver School Board. I was elected in 2002, mere months after our then education minister, Christy Clark, now the premier of my province, had stripped our provincial teachers union of their collective agreement rights on class size and class composition. Yes. The very first thing my board did in Vancouver the night we were sworn in, this has never happened before in the history of British Columbia school boards, we passed a motion of non-confidence in our Minister of Education. We knew that it was a symbolic gesture, but we also knew that we were beginning an essential fight for the rights of teachers and kids in our classrooms. Now, it only took 14 years, but I also want to give a shout out to the Supreme Court of Canada. Because of their ruling on that decision by our now premier, politicians across the country now know that if you're going to mess with collective agreements, you're going to have to pay the price. And trust me, nothing makes me happier than seeing our Minister of Finance talking about hundreds of millions of possible reinvestment in our public education system in BC. Okay. I want a show of hands. For who in the room is this your first time at a PD day? Just raise your hands. Anybody? Okay, yeah, I want to acknowledge the folks in the room who've come out for the first time. Give it up for them. Give it up for them. This is a day of firsts. It's the first time for some of you at a PD day for the ETT. It's the first time a sitting Prime Minister has addressed the ETT at their PD day. That's pretty cool. I mean, for 10 years we had a guy we wouldn't invite, but you know, as John said earlier. And there's another first that's about to happen right now. This is the first time at a ETT PD day where members are going to engage directly with members from the morning stage. And that's never happened before outside of a workshop setting in the afternoon. And so I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. We have 3 of your fellow teachers here, Tim Hanna, Laura McCoy, and Marcia Thompson. They're going to share with us their stories of both why they got involved in social justice issues in the first place, and then why they chose to use the ETT, your union, their union, as their voice to collectively amplify their issues and their concerns and their advocacy on behalf of students and public education in the Toronto public school system. My work across the country is doing leadership development with people who are working on social justice issues, and I've been doing a bit of work with the crew on the stage, thinking about how we can share our stories with others in a context like this. So here's what we're going to do. All 3 of them are going to share their stories with you, first about why they decided to get involved in social justice issues. Then we have a question for you that we're going to discuss as a large group. And then they're going to share another story with you about why they use the ETT as their vehicle for engagement on public education advocacy. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Tim to share with you his story of why he got involved in social justice.
So before I begin, I need to apologize if the light is reflecting off my forehead. I have no control over that. So many years ago on my journey on becoming a teacher, I was first an artist. 4 pieces of cheese, a little bit of lettuce, some onions, some olives. Yes, I was a sandwich artist. And I enjoyed that because one of the great things about working in a Subway shop was that I got to see regular people. And I got to feed them, and I knew what they wanted for their orders. But the downside was that I worked in a small town, and I didn't really have my own identity. I was often seen as, oh, you're Sheila's son, or oh, you're Reg's son, or oh, you're Dan's brother? And that was not something I really wanted to be known as quite often. To make matters even better, I got my mother a job at Subway working with me, so that meant I had seniority. It actually didn't really mean anything because we didn't have a union, and at the end of the day, she was still my mother, so I still had to listen to her. So people at Subway were complaining about the inequitable distribution of shifts and how the raises worked, and people were going to our bosses and they were getting preferential treatment, and so people came to my mother and I and they were complaining about that. I don't know what look we had about us that said you can go and talk to them, but they did. And so this added fuel to our fire because I lived at home and I was traveling back and forth every day with my mother, and we had these discussions in the car, and it also gave us an opportunity to say, well, what are we going to do to change things? Because things need to change. We were angry, they were angry. And so, being one to speak up periodically, I approached our employers and I said, can we take some of our staff meeting time in order to talk about these discussions or these issues that people were having? And they were receptive to the idea, so far so good. The day came of our staff meeting, we're sitting in these uncomfortable chairs, we're having a discussion about what's new at Subway, and when the opportunity came for us to share why, what issues we were having, you could have heard an olive drop on the floor. It was dead quiet. Nobody spoke up. And so it was up to my mother and I to share what it was that everybody shared with us. And it was very disappointing because nobody had our backs, and it looked as if it was only one-sided. So what I learned from that day is that although people have similar experiences and have similar challenges and want change to happen, if we don't support one another, change is not going to happen at all. So fast forward several years, and here I am in Toronto, gainfully employed, still on my journey, and I've not always been as involved in our union. I don't knock on doors. I don't claim to know everything there is to know about our union because I'm still on that learning curve, but my involvement increased about 4 years ago, and I can attribute that to joining the ETT Dragon Boat team. Yes, you are looking at a gold medalist. Gold medalist, thank you. This actually gave me an opportunity to form long-lasting friendships and make real connections, and when you try to squeeze 20 adults into a long, narrow boat, you're bound to connect with somebody. This also provided me an opportunity as a mental and physical weekly release because I would meet these same people on a weekly basis. We'd talk about issues at school, we would support each other, we would have conversations, share stories, successes, and challenges, professional dialogue, but most importantly, we got to share laughter. They were also the ones that encouraged me to attend my first of many ETT meetings. I've been a delegate for the annual ETFO meetings in the summer. I've attended the ETT gala dinners, which I would not have done without their encouragement. And many of them were also on committees, so I thought, hey, why not join a committee? So a few years ago, I joined the LGBTQI committee, and now I'm the chair of that committee. So things happen for a reason. Most recently, I've become an organizer, so I was part of the first wave of conversations, and to get the changes our Toronto students deserve. I never thought I'd be involved in the union, but I'm really glad I am because I have made those meaningful connections. I see people on a weekly and daily basis that I truly consider my friends, and I feel connected.
I was raised in a home surrounded by kids, 6 children altogether and foster children at various times. My parents raised us with ideas of social justice and community. My mother was briefly a teacher, as was my father, but then they both channeled their energies into other pursuits, chief among them raising children and making a living in order to support this. I remember a friend I had in elementary school always wanting to hang out at my house because of the chaos and the noise. She was an only child and loved the idea of so many siblings, of the freedom and the activity. In my family, we painted on the basement floors and posted our drawings all over the kitchen walls. Along with artwork created by a crowd of children, my mother plastered the walls with inspirational sayings all around the phone and on the front of the fridge. I remember one by Judith Snow, a writer and activist, that said, "Walking is a gift and not walking is also a gift. Speaking is a gift and not speaking is a different kind of gift." I remember that my grandmother was confused. How could not walking be a gift? She shook her head in disbelief, but my mother, raised by parents who had left the steel towns and coal mines of the Maritimes to seek fortune elsewhere, was not swayed. She knew that we all had gifts. The children that my parents adopted had disabilities, and an important lesson in my life was to be humble. You, my parents would say, are no better than anyone else. They were loving and supportive, but by this they meant that everyone has value. Be humble. Learn to recognize the gifts that others have, even if you don't see them at first. My mother knew that we all had gifts, but perhaps even more importantly, that we all had responsibilities. We had a responsibility to our family, to our community, and to the health of our planet. Another one of the postcards on the wall had the words of Martin Niemöller. First they came for the socialists, but I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. So there I was, reading the sayings and talking on the phone in the kitchen, because those were the days when the phone was attached to the wall and the long curly cord held you there. And I stood there talking on the phone, and the words became imprinted in my brain, and I knew that I had a responsibility to speak out.
My name is Marcia, and my background is Jamaican. This is my story. I was raised in a family where my mother was a political activist who met my father, the politician. I learned from an early age to stand up for what is right and what you believe in versus what is easy. My first exposure to activism was when I attended a rally where political songs were sung, and I showed the symbol of the party as everyone else was doing. My mother was also a scrutineer, and as I watched her as she collected data from the interviews in different homes, that excited me. And so I continued to demonstrate an avid interest in activism as my father continued to influence change in the trade union and as mayor of the city. One of the biggest moments of my political eyes being open was when the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18 by the late Michael Manley, and for the first time I was able to vote, dipping my fingers into the red ink and never wanting to wash my finger. These were exciting times for schoolers as we got the opportunity for the first time to be a part of the decisions that would influence change and impact Jamaica for generations to come. We were the trendsetters and the first high school students to vote, to witness history being made, and to attend school the following morning celebrating our adulthood, yet not paying taxes. The seed had been sown, and my activism never wavered. As a teacher, going back to teach at my alma mater, I participated in several teacher demonstrations, either outside the Ministry of Education or on the sidewalk of the school, for better salary and benefits, and for stoplights to be placed near the school gates, as several students had been killed by speeding motorists. My mother and father also exposed me to a strong foundation in their Christian faith, which solidified belief that all of us are born equal, and my strong interest in equity and social justice. My faith is my guiding light. Like the lighthouse for the ships, so is my faith. I was taught not to be fearful, but to use fear to motivate me into action, because inertia and apathy would never change anything. So the acronym for FAIR was instilled in me. F equals faith equals hope that things will change, which E energizes me to A, activate my inner strength and draw on my faith to do what is R, right, and not what is easy, copping out. My passion for activism strengthened, and my late mother always told me, like father, like daughter, we are proud of you. Never lose sight of your faith. Be humble. Walk with princes, but never lose the common touch. Thank you.
Thank you all. All right. We've heard a little bit from 3 fellow members, and now we're going to give you a minute. The ETT is in a process of having 11,000 conversations about the union and about engagement and about public education. And so we're going to start that process right now. Going to bring up a question here, just in groups of 3 or 2. Share the answer to the following with someone beside you. What compels you to get involved in your community or in the ETT? We're going to take a couple of minutes right now. What motivates you to get up and stand up and get engaged? Take a minute right now. Okay, folks, I'm going to ask you to, well, apparently you all know what this means, so I'll do this. I love teachers. You're amazing. Okay, I know that was a quick share, but we just wanted to have a quick opportunity to hear from a couple of other members about what compels you to get engaged in the issues you care about. And now, our storytellers are going to share one other quick story with you about the ETT and about public education. And each of those stories has an ask for you, a request, a question. So we're going to start off again with Tim Hanna, who's going to share with us his story.
So my first real experience with people in the labor movement and standing up to fight the fight was several years ago when I was first hired in Toronto. I was eager, I was a new hire, I was thinking, I'm going to change the world. And I had this wonderful idea of what strikes were about. People walking on a picket line, they were holding up signs with creative messages on them, chanting some inspirational chant, and singing some inspirational song. But it wasn't like that. Our QP members went on strike. This wasn't just a cutback of some of the work, it meant me crossing the picket line. I remember thinking, what am I supposed to do? I know that we have to support them, but how are we going to do it? So on the morning that we showed up at school, we found ourselves across the street of the picket line, waiting for some sort of direction. Our superintendent came by not too long afterwards and said, this is not your strike. You need to be in this school, and if you don't go into the school, then you're going to face some repercussions. And I'm like, what? My first year teaching, and I'm already going to have a disciplinary note in my file? It was kind of exciting, but also very frightening at the same time. So we thought about how else can we support our members. So we went outside at recess time, we went outside at lunchtime, and I thought there's got to be more that I can do. So drawing on my artistic talents as a sandwich artist, I made our Kipi brothers and sisters toasted egg sandwiches for breakfast, but I also changed the lyrics to a Kenny Rogers song, and we sang that in front of the school as well. Now, this was one of the hardest things I had to do. Not singing the song, that wasn't it. It was crossing my very first picket line. From that experience, I knew that teachers and our support staff would be able to further develop a sense of community. And when I think about supporting each other, not only does this come to mind, but also the number of rallies that I've been to since then. And another one that resonates with me is being a part of closing of Bay Street a few years back. For me, yeah, that was fun. For me, there's nothing like the energy of hundreds and hundreds of people standing up for what is right, what we believe in, and working together. So it brings me to my point now where I am one of these organizers, and I've been going into schools and I've been having conversations with many of you. And something that people keep telling me time and time again is that class sizes throughout our Toronto District School Board are just the right size. We have additional supports in our classrooms. Our specialized programs are in place, and the students receiving support are being properly serviced. I've also been told that we have the adequate amount of paperwork, that time is given to us to complete paperwork so we can spend our time with our students. I've also been told that schools have clear policies around students who present challenging behaviors and that there is consistency with that support, and that across the TDSB, especially with the people that I've spoken with, our professional judgment is being honored and members feel respected and safe to voice their concerns. Now, that is what I'd say if it were true, but we know that's not the case. What I have heard that there is an increase in safety concerns for our students in the classes and for our members due to the rise of students presenting behaviors such as chair throwing, kicking, spitting, punching, hair pulling with little to no support. I've also been told that the amount of paperwork downloaded on us is suffocating, and the timelines around them are suffocating as well, with no time allotted, taking away from time that we should be planning for our students with various needs. There is an increased need of mental health supports for our students and staff. There is a lack of support for our most vulnerable students in terms of resources and bodies in the classroom. Class sizes, as we know it, are too large in the kindergarten program and also in the junior and intermediate programs. And I've also heard that there is, and I've experienced myself, there is a culture of fear still in place in our schools with a lack of accountability for administration. Now, I can be complacent with the way things are and choose not to do anything about it. But I know that if I want change to happen, then I have to be an agent of change. And as some of you know, I've been known to rock the boat now and again. Not just for rocking the boat's sake, because that would be ridiculous. The art is knowing which boat to rock, how hard to rock it, to make sure that nobody's left in the wake behind. And I know it is hard work, but I also know that it's once again to start rocking that boat. If we want to see the meaningful changes we need to get for our schools, Toronto students deserve, and quite frankly, we deserve, because our working conditions are their learning conditions. There's no denying strength in numbers. I have come to realize that I am, that you are, together we are our union and we can make a difference. And my ask of you is, how are you going to get involved to help make these changes happen? Thank you.
I just before Laura shares her story, I know there's a lot of awesome conversations going on in the room, but this room is an echo chamber. And so I'm gonna ask for those, if you're out in the back, feel free to take your conversation outside. If you're here, feel free to drop your conversation to 0 and quiet, and so we can give the storytellers just a little bit of space. Thanks very much. Over to Laura.
In the fall of 2012, we were feeling the imminent threat to our collective agreement and the impending doom that was Bill 115. There was fear that so much of what we had achieved over the past number of years would be taken away from us. I knew that I must overcome my natural reticence and reservations and connect with people. The fight was not just for me, not just for teachers, but was a fight for the community and for public education. I was teaching at Winchester Public School near Parliament in Wellesley. Woohoo, Winchester. There was a core group of teachers from various schools in the family who were concerned with the direction that negotiations were taking, and we knew that we could not fight this fight alone. We met over coffee and sometimes over beer at the House of Parliament to share our concerns and build a coalition to respond to the issues. We had the support of John Smith, who was our executive officer at the time, as we connected with parents and community members to strategize and brainstorm to figure out what to do next. We held weekly Friday pickets outside the office of MPP Glenn Murray, which brought crowds and music and celebration and even donuts from my principal. We spoke to parents on the street. We met commuters as I left the subway station. And then finally, after much preparation, we held the first in a series of public meetings. It was held in a community building to be separate from the TDSB. This was not a TDSB meeting, but was a meeting of concerned teachers, union members, community activists, and parents. I was pleased with the discussion at this meeting to see the energy and enthusiasm that people brought to the table as we brainstormed the issues that we faced and considered where to go next. We built our community connections with the understanding that we all had a stake in public education. When I was a child, my family had a brief foray into the world of parent-run cooperative alternative schools, but we returned to public education with the conviction of the converted. My parents had an awareness that public education is a need and a right for all. Now, as a teacher and as a parent with children in the TDSB, I have a vested interest in a solid public education system. And so I work as a union steward, and I work as a mobilizer, and I work in community outreach. I had a difficult spring last year. I was declared surplus to my school after 18 years of teaching because of the ARC process and the elimination of the English stream at the school. I've ended up at a school that I think will be great, but still, it's a new school and it takes some getting used to. So this fall is also difficult, but I know that it isn't just me. Teachers all over the place that I talk to tell me the same thing. We are drowning. We're drowning in IEPs and paperwork. We're drowning in meetings and yard duty. We're drowning because we are expected to be all things to all kids. Because we worry about our students who are cutting themselves, and we're expected to be mental health workers. And we worry about our students who did not eat breakfast, and we're expected to be social workers. And we worry about our quiet students who get lost in a class of 34, and we worry on and on and on. I wrote this as I helped my daughter with some impossibly complicated Lego building, and in between hockey practice and lunch making, and consultation with my son about a tricky homework assignment, and planning a trip to the art supply store to buy materials, with the weight of marking not yet done and planning not yet planned, with the realization that one of my students is coming to IST and I haven't filled out the paperwork yet. And there is the feeling that I don't have enough time in my life for everything, and the feeling that I don't have enough time for the union, and how can I support the union now? When I was writing this, I emailed my mom to ask her about the quotations on the kitchen wall to see if she remembered any funny ones or other interesting ones. She shared this one with me. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. But then she also told me something else that has reminded me of the importance of my work as a teacher. She told me, and you might have seen this on the news, that our backyard neighbors in Ottawa, who've lived there for years and years, all the time I was growing up, were found Monday night murdered by their son. Their son was a young man who had struggled in school, who had autism, who had the family support but was having a rough time. From his early school days, his parents worried about him getting the support that he needed. And I'm reminded of all the kids that we see before us every day, and the fear and the worry that we face, that parents face, about not being enough, about not having enough resources to make school a success for all of our children. So it is precisely now that I need to be active in the union. I am drowning because the work is not doable. And we as teachers, as parents, and as caring members of society, and as union members, we need to come together and support each other. That we must come together with a shared vision of a strong public education system that works for all of us. My life is full, my work life is full, and my family life is full, but I know that even though I have so much going on, the best chance that I have, the best chance that any of us as teachers across the TDSB have to keep from being overwhelmed and to keep from drowning in the system is to work with other teachers to support each other and to work collectively and strategically and passionately for the kind of public schools, working conditions, respect, and funding that every child deserves. So today, I'm asking you to consider how you can get involved in our community organizing. Talk to the Committee for Community Outreach and have a meeting in your community and build connections that we need with parents, activists, and other community groups. Alone, we will be overwhelmed. Alone, things will get worse. But together, we have a chance to change public education in Toronto for the better. It will only get better if we work together. Thank you.
As an immigrant teacher with all my academic credentials from Jamaica, I was constantly asked if I had to do additional courses to qualify myself to teach in Canada. My response would always be a resounding no. Yet I continued to feel that my capabilities and my intelligence to teach were always being questioned. This feeling was confirmed when I did my first AQ course, which was Special Education Part 1, which left me more sympathetic and feeling empathy with the spec ed students. It was during this course that I was constantly being asked about my qualifications as I continued to encounter several acts of discrimination, subtle racism, exclusion, rudeness, and condescending behavior. I would share these encounters with my colleagues at Brookview Middle School, who continued to reassure me that I was qualified because the TDSB employed me. I was even made to feel worse when I made a cake for snacks and no one ate that cake. I had to take it home. But what the enemy meant for evil, God turned it around for my good. That only strengthened my desire for justice when I joined the staff at another school and I received constant encouragement from my new colleague, Tony Bagwat, who was the behavior teacher, and I was the MID, the mild intellectual development teacher. He recognized the care I demonstrated for my students, and together we encouraged our administrators to change our class names from behavior to grade 6, 7, 8F, and MID to grade 6, 7, 8E. I was again surplused and met Sue Kirby, who needed an alternate. So I decided to take my Canadian plunge into activism. My first taste was at an annual meeting where I met Felicia Samuels, and then at the full-day steward training at the Toronto Delta Center, where we were placed into workshops, and the facilitators were both Pam Dogra and Felicia Samuels. I was impressed by the passion of these young women of color standing up for justice, and that electrified me. I was hooked and I never looked back. Since then, I have joined several committees, including the Anti-Racism, Equity, and Social Justice Committee, CB Committee, PD Committee, and I am presently the chair of PAC. I am into my second term as a regional councillor. I previously served 2 terms as a member of the Provincial Status of Women's Committee, and I have participated in several workshops, rallies, and conferences, and I was able to pass the members-only meeting motion on November the 22nd. I hate injustice, oppression, racism, and discrimination. And my first encounter with being a victim of an education system that is designed to divide and conquer was when I was sent home by a principal. Because a white boy in my special ed class, who was never taken to team, accused me of dropping a carousel desk on him. He moved threateningly at a classmate, another Asian boy, and I encouraged the youngster to report the incident to the principal. Needless to say, I was read the Riot Act. No question asked, but I believe the opportunity presented itself for my principal to retaliate because I always challenged administration when it came to equity with my students, the intensive communication class, the euphemism for dumb class. Now I know David conquered Goliath, but I do not possess the strength to lift a carousel desk. Yet I was let out of the school like someone contaminating the place and being watched to ensure my departure of school property. However, before I left my classroom, I ensured that the IEPs that were due and had been packaged was nicely handed to my VP for her perusal as I smiled and told her of the comments I noted for her approval. My parents would have been proud. With the avid support of my executive officer, Pam Dogra, and the continued encouragement to keep my faith by Sonia Ellisigan, I was eventually cleared of all charges. However, I decided to remain at that site with my integrity, which was a little bit scathed, but intact. However, one of my biggest concerns during this situation was for my students who had to be questioned by the police. But I reassured the parent that as long as the truth was told, the truth would set me free. At the end of the school year, my principal transferred out. It was a battle that at times rattled my faith and made me question myself. But it proved that when you stand up for what you believe and when you challenge the status quo, be prepared for a dose of backlash and a bucket full of reprisals. But when the going gets tough, the tough gets going, and I was adamant and determined that I would still be standing at the end of the rounds in this battle. I am a teacher employed by the TDSB. I do not expect to be treated unjustly. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Do not judge me by the color of my skin, but by the content of my character." I am saying it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. So colleagues, this is our union and not the union. We are all stakeholders in the struggle together, and a chain is as strong as its weakest link. United we bargain, divided we beg. That is a message on a button I bought at the Chicago Labor Notes Conference. As we ask our students to make connections, so should we try to make a connection with something today. Have a conversation with at least one teacher when you return to your respective school, and make a decision to be a part of the change, because change is coming. We have to work together to save all our students, and we have to put aside our differences and become a force to be reckoned with. The change we want to see, we must decide to be that change. Become active. You do not have to be an activist, but I encourage you to become active. Attend at least one ETT general meeting and go back to your schools and engage your colleagues. Join at least one committee and become a part of the change in labor to see and learn what we can do to change the system. Visualize what changes we would like individually, and then visualize what that looks like collectively. Brothers and sisters in the labor movement, we have to get it right. We pay union dues. We must fight to procure the best education system that benefits our students and a system that makes our lives less stressful. Become involved and give our ETT executive more ammunition to work at the bargaining table in defending our rights. When teachers are being sent home daily on allegations that cannot change and cannot be substantiated and nothing happens, we become more fearful. Hold our executive and our EOs accountable and stop saying the union. I have learned that even when I'm fearful and try not to make my opponents any wiser, I stand up on the inside and fight back. Use the resources and institutions that are available to protect our rights. So I challenge you to make the choice to do something different when you return to your classrooms. Let us do what is right by our students to do what is right for us. Activate the inner Davids within us to defeat the Goliath system. Speak to an ETT organizer and tell your stories in the interviews. Ask how you can become active or more active, and let us begin to ramp up engines of solidarity, turning the tides into a tsunami collective bargaining that hopefully cleanses the system of oppression. Remember, united we stand, divided we fall. Stand up, and in the words of Bob Marley, get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. We're tired of the ism and the schisms. Brothers and sisters, solidarity. Thank you.
How about a round of applause for all three of our storytellers? Just to reiterate our asks of you, talk to an ETT organizer today, organize a community meeting at your school, talk with other teachers about their hopes for their schools and how together you can make those hopes reality. Thank you guys again, and thank you very much.